We have all felt that moment when pretending becomes unbearable. It is like standing before a locked door you have held shut for years, only to find your strength gone and the door swings open on its own. Why does this release feel both terrifying and inevitable? Perhaps it is because the soul knows when the mask must fall. As Jung understood, truth is not a sudden choice, but the slow emergence of what has always been there, waiting in the depths to be lived. Before we begin, take a moment to like and subscribe. The more you engage and stay with the content, the more YouTube shares these timeless insights with others. By doing so, you're not only helping this channel grow, but also spreading Carl Jung's transformative wisdom to those seeking meaning and inner truth. Let's dive into the depth of the psyche together. When the unconscious stirs toward individuation, it does not arrive with noise or force. It comes quietly. In the moment you can no longer betray yourself. Something shifts, not because you will it, but because the self, the deepest center of the psyche, insists on it. It feels like standing at the edge of a cliff, realizing that the only way forward is to honor what you are. At first, the shift is subtle. You stop saying yes when your whole being aches to say no. You begin to sense what depletes you: the situations, the conversations, the people whose presence dims your energy. Once you would endure without question, now your body speaks with a clear unease. The whisper is steady. This is no longer for you. It does not shout or demand. It simply tells a truth that will not be silenced. Transformation begins here not in grand proclamations, but in sacred refusals. A refusal to shrink, a refusal to distort your truth for belonging, a refusal to spend another day in dissonance. Living from truth is less about announcing it to the world and more about embodying it in the smallest, most consistent ways. It shows in your choices, in the cadence of your voice, in the way you walk through the day with an authenticity that needs no witness. You no longer barter your worth to avoid solitude, for solitude itself becomes holy. You do not require others to see your path, because you finally see it yourself. This inner revolution is not staged for applause. It is unseen, yet unshakable. It changes how you move through the world, from reaction to deliberate response, from pleasing to peace. You begin to release old roles and take the serenity of truth over the safety of pretense. Your senses sharpen, your energy grows precise. What once confused you now rings as a clear no. And what resonates, however uncertain, feels like home. Distractions lose their hold. Alignment becomes your compass. There is no longer anything to prove. Worth is lived in each honest step. And now, I ask you to seal this moment. In the comments, leave the number. If you recognize the quiet uprising within the revolution that does not shout, but transforms, let it stand as a sign that you have heard the call of your own soul and chosen to answer, and that inner honesty reshapes everything. Your decisions, your relationships, even your silences. Carl Jung once said that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Living your truth is precisely that. It's not about denying your past, but integrating it, healing it, owning it, walking forward with all parts of you aligned. No longer fighting yourself. You begin to understand that your truth doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be yours. That awareness changes how you speak to yourself, how you see yourself, and how you hold yourself in difficult moments. You stop demanding that you be someone else. You start honoring the path you've already walked. Because it's that very path that brought you to this new way of being, this new way of existing from within. And from that place, everything starts to feel more real, not easier. Life will still have its challenges, but more honest. You no longer function on autopilot. You choose with intention. You decide what energy you let into your space. You choose what thoughts you feed, what emotions you nurture. And you do so without guilt, because you know that protecting your energy is not selfish. It's integrity, it's self-respect, it's coherence. Your relationships shift as well. Some grow deeper, they become more real, because now you're showing up without masks. And those who truly love you, love the unfiltered version of you. Others quietly fall away, not because you push them away, but because you've changed frequencies. They no longer meet you where you are, and that doesn't shatter you. It sets you free. Living your truth makes you more selective, not out of coldness, but from care, from discernment. You no longer hand your energy to just anyone. You've come to understand how sacred your presence truly is. You stop explaining yourself. You stop justifying what you feel. Your presence becomes enough. Your peace becomes non-negotiable. You learn that the truth isn't always comfortable, but it is always light. It doesn't burden. It doesn't weigh you down. It liberates. And that lightness begins to live in your body, in your breath, in your rest. Nights are different when you're not wearing masks. Silence becomes a sanctuary when you're no longer judging yourself. Your inner world expands when you stop pretending and start simply being. That expansion is so subtle, so gentle, that others may never notice it. But you will. You notice it in the way you speak to yourself when you fail, in the way you hold yourself when no one else does, in the way you stop begging for approval. Because you no longer need someone to tell you who you are. You already know, and once you know, everything around you begins to shift. Because living from your truth doesn't just change your inner world. It realigns your outer reality. You stop clinging to places where your soul has already left. You no longer maintain relationships out of habit. You no longer make silent pacts with fear, just to avoid discomfort. The clarity with which you now live causes certain things to fall away. Goals that no longer speak to who you are, routines that once drained you, people who only saw the outdated version of you. And while those losses may seem painful at first, the truth is, you're not losing anything real. You're making space for what's authentic. And when the real finally arrives, it doesn't feel heavy. It feels like coming home. Your energy becomes magnetic, not through effort, not through strategy, but through presence, through coherence. By simply being true to yourself, you begin to attract experiences that once seemed unimaginable. And all of that began the moment you stopped ignoring that quiet voice within, the moment you chose to live from your truth. When you begin living from a place of inner alignment rather than from need, everything subtly yet powerfully shifts. Synchronicities start occurring more frequently. Paths that once felt confusing now seem clearer. Decisions that used to feel overwhelming begin to feel firm and grounded. It's because you're no longer reacting from desperation or fear. You're responding from truth, from alignment. And in that alignment, you realize something profound. Living from your truth is not a place you arrive at, not a finish line you cross. It's a way of moving through life. It's how you walk, how you hold yourself each day, even when it hurts, even when it costs you something, even when no one else understands, because you feel it in your bones. And feeling it, that's enough. That internal loyalty, that unwavering fidelity to yourself is the most powerful and intimate expression of self-love. It's quiet. It doesn't make a scene, but its power is undeniable. When you become loyal to your truth, everything in your life that no longer aligns with it begins to fade away on its own. And as it fades, it leaves behind a sacred space, a clean, open void filled with potential. In that space, you finally have room to create a life that isn't built on the weight of other people's expectations or the echoes of unattended wounds. It's a life that grows from authenticity, from clarity, from presence. And here's the beautiful part. That space doesn't scare you anymore because you no longer fear your own presence. You're no longer afraid to be with yourself. You've learned that solitude isn't loneliness, it's resonance. From that resonance, your choices no longer emerge from external noise, but from inner stillness. You stop searching for signs with desperation because you've remembered how to listen. Your intuition, once drowned out by the compulsion to please, now becomes your steady guide. It doesn't scream, but it never hesitates. It leads with calm certainty. Living from your truth doesn't make you perfect. It makes you whole. It means you no longer split yourself into pieces to fit into places that were never meant for you. You stop silencing your voice just to be accepted. You stop acting from fear just to avoid rejection, because you've discovered the most painful thing isn't being rejected by others. It's rejecting yourself. And that self-rejection no longer lives within you. In its place, there's acceptance, but not a passive or resigned kind. It's a strong, loving acceptance. A deep respect that echoes through the way you speak to yourself, the way you take care of your needs, the way you choose yourself again and again. And when you live from that place, everything around you begins to shift. The world mirrors back what you project from within. And when what you project is authenticity, you stop attracting more of what you used to tolerate. Instead, you draw in people, experiences, and opportunities that resonate with your real vibration. You stop magnetizing the shallow or performative, and you begin to receive what is true, raw, and meaningful. Everything starts revolving around that inner coherence. And with it, your life finds a new rhythm, the rhythm of your soul. You also notice that your creativity begins to awaken, not necessarily to produce art for others, but to shape your own reality from a place of truth. Ideas come to you that never occurred before, because now you're no longer blocking your emotions. When you allow your emotions to flow freely without repressing them, inspiration rises naturally. You find new ways to express yourself. You say things you used to suppress. You make room for everything your soul has longed to share. Maybe you write, maybe you paint, or maybe you just speak differently to those around you. But it all originates from the same place, the alignment between what you feel and what you do. In that creative coherence, your energy becomes expansive. It reaches beyond you. It not only transforms your own life, but begins to inspire transformation in others. And you don't even try. You don't give advice. You don't preach or teach. You just are. You exist in truth, and your truth becomes a frequency that others can feel, even if they can't name it. You start noticing that people feel safer around you, more open, more willing to look within. And this doesn't happen because of what you say. It happens because you've stopped pretending, and that kind of authenticity liberates. It awakens. It heals. Eventually, you understand that living from your truth isn't just a personal journey. It's a way of serving others. Not from sacrifice, but from presence, from the grounded energy of someone who no longer hides. And because you no longer hide, you can hold sacred spaces of truth for others. And when you hold that space, you begin to feel an even deeper connection with everything. Life itself, natural cycles, the present moment. You no longer need things to unfold the way you imagined, because your energy is no longer attached to control. It's rooted in surrender, but not a surrender that weakens you, a surrender that empowers you. A deep trust that your truth will always lead you exactly where you're meant to be, even when the path isn't obvious. A trust that you don't need to move fast. You just need to move in your direction. When that happens, the anxiety quiets, the urge to compare fades, and peace becomes a natural state. Not something you have to fight for, but something you naturally return to. Something else begins to emerge. Quietly, yet profoundly. You begin to retrieve parts of yourself you thought were lost. Your laughter becomes more genuine, your voice steadier, your gaze clearer. It's not that you've become someone new. It's that you've stopped betraying yourself. And that loyalty to yourself brings back forgotten pieces of your essence. That's when you realize that living in your truth is not about reaching some perfect, idealized spiritual state. It's a daily practice, a conscious choice made in small moments, in the way you speak honestly, in the way you honor what you need, in the way you release what no longer fits, even when it still hurts. And the most magical part of all is this: the more you live from that real place, the more aligned your entire life becomes. Not because everything becomes flawless, but because you're no longer fragmented. You're in unity with yourself. And from that wholeness, life flows with less resistance and far more meaning. Something else also begins to happen. Your decisions simplify. Not because life has suddenly become easier, but because you no longer live in constant doubt. Your energy is no longer split between what you think you should do and what your heart truly feels, because those two forces have finally come into alignment. The endless inner conflict, the tug-of-war between your mind and your heart, has softened. And even though that may seem like a small change on the surface, it frees you from a heavy burden you didn't realize you were carrying for so long. You stop chasing answers in every direction. You no longer search for meaning in every book, every person, or every situation. Because at last, you realize that the most important answers were never outside of you. They were always within. You no longer need other people's approval to move forward, because your compass no longer resides in their gaze. It lives in your chest. What used to paralyze you, what once felt like a mountain too high to climb, now just becomes part of the landscape. It's still there, but it no longer controls you. You become more agile internally, more fluid, more rooted. You begin to feel, to perceive, to choose, not from impulse or fear, but from a deep clarity that only comes after listening to yourself in moments of deep silence, over and over again, especially in the times when no one else was listening. That kind of clarity can't be explained. It can only be felt. And with it comes the courage to say no, to set boundaries, not as walls of defense, but as sacred spaces of respect. You learn to walk away without guilt, to let go with peace, what you once clung to, out of fear. Because when you begin to live from your truth, fear no longer sits at the center of your decisions. You become the center. And when you center yourself, everything around you begins to align with that inner order. Slowly, you begin to discover a way of being in the world that you had never experienced before. A way that feels more serene, lighter, more at peace with who you are. The constant urgency dissolves. The rush to be somewhere else, to be someone else, fades away. It's not that you no longer have goals or dreams. It's just that you're no longer sprinting toward things that were never truly in harmony with your soul. Your inner sense of time begins to shift. You become more present, more intentional, more aware of your words and your actions. You stop reacting and you begin responding with presence, with thoughtfulness. You no longer explode at every bit of chaos outside you, because the storm inside has finally calmed, and that internal peace changes your energy in subtle but powerful ways. People around you notice. Some are drawn to the calm you now radiate, without fully understanding why. Others begin to drift away, quietly, without conflict. And you no longer take that personally, because you understand something deeper now. Truth has its own frequency, and not everyone is ready or willing to tune into it, and that too is okay. You let go of the need to be understood. You release the urge to fight for acceptance. Living from your truth doesn't mean everything is solved or perfect. It means you no longer carry the exhausting weight of hiding who you are. You allow yourself to not have all the answers. You allow yourself to change your mind, to evolve. You even allow yourself to make mistakes without losing yourself in shame, because your worth is no longer tied to perfection. Your value lies in the quiet knowing that step by step you are being true to yourself. Even when the path ahead is unclear, your truth holds you, and that truth becomes your inner home, a sacred place you can return to again and again, even in the midst of chaos, even when everything else around you is shifting. You no longer need to seek shelter in others. You don't need distractions to avoid feeling, because now you are that sacred space you once sought outside, and that changes everything. It transforms your relationship with the world. You begin to see everything around you with more compassion, but also with more discernment. You no longer romanticize what harms you, nor do you justify what doesn't resonate with your spirit. You start seeing things for what they are, not for what you wish they were, and even so, you choose the most conscious path, not out of idealism, but out of coherence with your soul. You begin to trust your intuition. Your perception sharpens. You feel before you understand. You sense things before they happen. You learn to trust those subtle signals that used to go unnoticed, because now that you truly listen to yourself, you also hear the universe more clearly, and the universe responds. Not always with words, but with synchronicities, with signs, with messages that arrive at just the right moment, with opportunities that show up, not when you're desperate, but when you're ready. And in that flow, without realizing it, life begins to feel lighter, not because it's suddenly weightless, but because you are no longer carrying it with resistance. You carry it with presence, with acceptance, with the understanding that when you live aligned with your truth, you no longer have to fight to be who you are. You simply are. And that is more than enough. And something beautiful happens when you reach that place. You begin to feel gratitude for all the things that once broke you, not because the pain becomes beautiful, but because you can now see that every difficult moment was part of the necessary process that brought you here, to this version of yourself that is more awake, more honest, more in tune with your essence. The wounds you once tried to hide are no longer sources of shame. They become sacred witnesses of your transformation. You stop seeing them as flaws and instead recognize them as portals, gateways your soul had to walk through in order to stop living from fear and begin living from truth. And that shift makes you both humbler and stronger. You no longer need to prove yourself. You no longer need to justify your path to anyone. Your truth doesn't compete with anyone else's. It simply is. It expresses itself. It honors itself. It sustains itself. And that gives you the strength to walk through life with a quiet dignity, a kind of strength that doesn't seek validation, only coherence. Even your relationship with the past changes. You no longer carry it as a weight. You carry it as wisdom. You stop carrying it like a burden and begin to see it as fertile ground. What once was pain now becomes wisdom. What once was loss now becomes clarity. And what once was fear now becomes presence. And that's when it hits you. Living from your truth isn't about having all the answers. It's about no longer lying to yourself. It's about refusing to shrink, refusing to fit into a version of yourself that no longer feels alive. Because once you let go of that expired version, everything that you truly are, deep within, finally begins to bloom. And when you bloom from your essence, it happens effortlessly. There's no need to push, no need to prove anything, no need to strive for acceptance. It's a natural unfolding, a quiet expansion, like a tree growing skyward without ever needing to justify the depth of its roots. You realize that true success has never been about reaching some external ideal, but about being profoundly, unapologetically yourself in a world that constantly tries to turn you into someone else. When that realization settles in your bones, your priorities begin to shift. You stop chasing possessions, and instead, you seek out experiences that feed your soul. You stop measuring your worth by your accomplishments and start measuring it by your ability to be authentic, to be faithful to who you are. Even when no one is watching, your life becomes rich with small, sacred moments that used to go unnoticed. A genuine conversation, a silent walk, a sunset that seems to speak directly to your heart. Because now, your soul is awake, truly awake, and can finally recognize the beauty that was once drowned out by noise. You're no longer obsessed with chasing extraordinary moments, because now you see that the extraordinary is found in the simplicity of each moment lived in truth. And that, which seems so simple, changes everything. The pressure to appear a certain way dissolves. The exhaustion of wearing masks fades away. The need to be understood by everyone becomes irrelevant. What remains is a quiet peace. A presence so complete, so full, that there is no need to explain, no need to justify. You simply exist. You simply are. And if these words resonate with something deep inside you, it's because your soul has always known this path. Living your truth is not something you learn. It's something you remember. Something that has always been there, waiting to be honored. It's no coincidence that you've come this far. It's not random that you're still walking, still seeking that which makes you feel most like you. Your transformation has already begun, even if you can't see it clearly yet. Don't forget, every act of honesty with yourself is a step closer to the life your soul has always known it deserves. If these words have walked beside you, if they have awakened something within you, then let this be an invitation, a sacred call to keep exploring, to keep uncovering, to keep listening to the quiet whispers of your soul. Let this truth, your truth, continue to light the way forward. Carl Jung once said that true growth begins the moment we stop living under the expectations of others. And it's only when you break free from that silent craving for approval that something inside you begins to shift. It's not sudden or loud. It's subtle, like a tide slowly returning to the shore. Your energy, once directed outward in a desperate search for validation, slowly starts to come back to you. And when that happens, it feels as though, for the first time, you're coming home to yourself. For so long, you've lived through the eyes of others. You carefully chose the right words, the most acceptable gestures, the softest tone. You stayed quiet at the exact moment you wanted to speak, all to avoid discomfort. For them, not for you. And in the process, piece by piece, you lost yourself. You drifted away from what you truly think, feel, and need. Until one day, something within you cracks. And in that moment, you realize you can no longer pretend. You can't keep giving yourself in fragments. You can't keep wearing a mask to belong in a world that doesn't even see the real you. And then, something powerful happens. You stop trying to please, not with an outburst, not with a scene, but with a quiet decision. I'm done. And in that silent act begins your real liberation. You start to become clearer, lighter, more transparent, more you. You no longer tailor your opinions to be accepted, nor do you hide your sensitivity out of fear that it will be seen as weakness. You stop maintaining connections out of obligation or habit. You begin to choose yourself, not from a place of selfishness, but from a deep respect for your own energy. You no longer need to be the strong one all the time, the pleasant one, the one who understands everyone else, the one who never makes waves. You begin to honor your discomfort, your exhaustion, your truth. And by doing so, you start clearing away all the things you built from a fear of rejection. Your way of relating to the world changes. Some people drift away. Others look at you with confusion. Not because you've become someone else, but because you're finally showing up as your true self, without filters. And those who only valued you when you were compliant now struggle to understand the version of you that sets boundaries. But you don't go back. You've already tasted the peace that comes with being unapologetically yourself. And once you've felt that, everything else starts to feel unnecessary. You no longer explain yourself. You stop trying to convince anyone why you're not the same person who tolerated everything. Your presence becomes enough. And in that enoughness, you discover a new kind of strength. The strength of authenticity. What once hurt because you feared disappointing others now becomes your compass. You learn to say no without guilt. You learn to walk away without providing explanations. You learn to protect your energy without feeling bad for doing so. And, surprisingly, instead of losing yourself in this process, you finally find yourself. Because beneath the endless effort to be liked was the most honest version of you. The one that doesn't strive for perfection, but seeks truth. That version begins to rise when you stop living for approval. And when that happens, your entire energy begins to shift. You stop attracting what demands you to shrink and adapt. Instead, you begin to draw in what resonates with your essence. And from that moment on, your entire life starts to rearrange itself. Conversations become more genuine. Silences become more comfortable. Decisions become lighter. You no longer choose based on what others want. You choose based on your inner alignment. And that kind of alignment is magnetic. It doesn't shout, but it speaks volumes. It doesn't push, but it transforms. Your presence begins to carry a different frequency, not because you're louder or more dramatic, but because there's a quiet peace in you that wasn't there before. A calm that doesn't come from being understood, but from understanding yourself. When you break free from the need to please, you also free yourself from the inner pressure to always be the one who's right. You allow yourself to not have all the answers. You give yourself permission to stumble. You give yourself permission to feel. And all of that becomes part of your humanity. The more you choose yourself, the sharper your intuition becomes. You begin to just know, without overthinking, what feels right and what doesn't, who belongs in your life and who doesn't, where you're meant to go and where you no longer need to stay. Because now, your energy, no longer consumed by pleasing others, begins to clear, to focus. And that clarity becomes your guide. It protects you. It empowers you. And most importantly, it sets you free. When your energy is no longer focused on fitting in, it begins to root itself in what truly matters. You stop needing to be everywhere, to say yes to every invitation, to maintain relationships that drain you just because of emotional loyalty. You start choosing silence when there's no truth, distance when there's no reciprocity, solitude when your surroundings no longer reflect who you are, and all the things that used to bring you guilt, the fear of being judged, of being misunderstood, now feel like self-care. You stop needing others to understand you in order to feel valid, because now you understand yourself. That inner understanding becomes your refuge. You no longer act out of habit or say yes out of duty or smile just to keep the peace. And in this new way of being, you don't become cold or distant. You become whole. When you begin to live from a place of honesty, even if that honesty makes things uncomfortable at times, even if it unsettles others, you start to realize something profound. That discomfort isn't rejection, it's purification. It's life's way of cleaning your energetic space, removing everything that was only there because you were trying to be liked. You see, for so long, you pushed yourself to fit in, to be accepted, to be pleasing. But now, without that effort, what remains is far more real. It's more conscious, more aligned with who you truly are. And when that happens, something unexpected takes place. You begin to feel lighter, not because life has suddenly become easier or devoid of problems, but because you finally stopped carrying what was never yours to bear. The masks, the roles, The carefully edited versions of yourself start falling away one by one, and beneath all of it, there's a voice that starts to emerge with clarity. That voice is yours. It's no longer muffled, no longer hidden behind layers of performance or expectation. It speaks not to please, but to express truth. You stop negotiating your truth for approval. You stop sacrificing your peace just to feel like you belong. You no longer shrink yourself to fit into molds that never truly held you. The exhausting effort to maintain a perfect image fades away because you've finally seen through the illusion. That perfection was never real to begin with. It was a mask, a lie, a performance. And now, authenticity takes its rightful place. The trembling voice that speaks honestly, the tired eyes that no longer hide behind filters. The new boundaries you've set, boundaries that sometimes ache, but that hold you up. These are now the things that matter. You don't live to be liked anymore. You live to be someone you don't have to betray, and in that daily decision, even when it's uncomfortable, you begin to recognize yourself. You start to reclaim everything you once put on hold just to be accepted. Your creativity, your intuition, your energy. These parts of you finally find room to breathe. They flourish. Because the moment you stop living to meet expectations is the moment your inner world begins to shift. Your vibration changes, not on the surface, but deep at the root. When you live to please, your energy contracts, you become smaller. But when you live from authenticity, everything in you expands. And while that expansion might not always be visible to others, inside it reshapes everything. You begin to inhabit yourself more deeply. You take up space in the world without apology. You speak from the soul, even if your voice isn't the loudest in the room, because now you understand that your truth doesn't need to scream to be valid. It only needs to be lived. And as you live it, your energy changes. It becomes more grounded, more magnetic, more selective. Not from a place of separation, but from a place of clarity. You stop begging for affection. You no longer confuse being accepted with being loved. You stop needing to be chosen, because you've finally chosen yourself. And from that place, everything starts to change. The way you look at life, the way you relate to others, the peace you feel in spaces that used to disturb your spirit. You begin to realize that you don't have to fill every silence with noise, nor explain every choice, nor justify your absence. Because when you live in truth, there's no longer a need to seek validation to feel worthy. Living this way isn't always comfortable, but it is light. And in this new way of being, the world begins to respond differently. You're no longer projecting need, you're radiating presence. And it's in that presence where everything begins to fall into place. Your relationships, your decisions, your path. Not because you've mastered the art of being liked, but because you've stopped abandoning yourself to be loved. And that right there, is the highest form of love you can give to yourself. From that place, your life starts to feel more real. Not perfect, not free of hardship, but deeply, unapologetically yours. You're no longer chasing after what doesn't see you. You're no longer fighting to be understood by those unwilling to listen. You start accepting that not everyone will resonate with you. And that's okay. Your worth no longer depends on fitting in. It's rooted in staying loyal to the person you're becoming. Even your silences begin to shift. They used to be heavy, filled with doubt, plagued by the anxiety that you might be doing something wrong. But now, your silences are sacred. They are moments of listening to yourself, of breathing, of making choices untainted by the weight of other people's expectations. And the things you once feared, judgment, rejection, loneliness, begin to lose their grip, not because they disappear from the world, but because they no longer have control over you. You've stopped needing to be an acceptable version of yourself to feel loved. That in itself is a quiet revolution. You no longer live with the chronic fear of disappointing others. Now, you live with the unwavering commitment to never abandon yourself again. And from that inner shift, your entire path transforms. Even your relationship with time begins to change. You're no longer obsessed with doing everything quickly, with responding instantly, with keeping up dynamics that drain you, all in the name of not letting others down. Now, you honor your own rhythm, and you discover that your pace is slower, but deeper. It's more present, more intentional. The emotional urgencies that once ruled your life begin to dissolve. You no longer feel responsible for fixing everything, for saving everyone, for explaining every move you make. You come to realize that so often, the need to please was just a disguise, a way to control outcomes, to make sure people didn't leave, didn't get angry, didn't change their view of you. But now, you prefer freedom over perfection. You choose authenticity, even if that means not everyone stays. And in that brave decision, you uncover a profound truth. What leaves you when you stop pretending was never truly yours. The time you once spent maintaining appearances, you now invest in knowing yourself, caring for yourself, and creating from a place of truth. And when that time transforms into inner space, you begin to experience a peace you've never known before. Not because everything is fixed, but because you are finally walking your path without self-betrayal. And within that new inner space, everything begins to transform, especially your definitions of what success means, what it means to connect, and what love truly is. You no longer chase relationships to fill emotional voids. Instead, you seek connections that honor your essence. You stop doing things just to impress others, and start doing them because they resonate with you on a deeper level. You begin to live with more coherence rather than out of obligation. And that shift changes your entire energetic frequency in profound ways. Your anxiety diminishes. The inner pressure to constantly prove yourself fades, making room for a softer kind of certainty, a stability that no longer relies on external achievements or validation. The mental noise grows quieter because you've stopped negotiating your worth. You speak to yourself differently. You look at yourself through a more compassionate lens. And most importantly, you behave differently, with greater integrity, with clarity, with calm. You come to realize that what once felt essential really wasn't. That the masks you wore cost more than they helped. That constantly trying to be likable comes at a price. One too high to pay when the cost is losing yourself. Living without the need to please doesn't mean you isolate yourself. It means you live from such a grounded center that you no longer twist and bend yourself to be loved. Nor do you break yourself just to be understood. You finally understand that those who can truly see you as you are the only ones who deserve to stay. And everything else, you let it go, without fear. Because your sense of completeness no longer depends on anything or anyone outside of you. You now reside in your truth. And that alone is enough. And from that place of truth, what once felt like a burden becomes effortless. You no longer overthink what to say or how to act, because now you simply are. From that place, authenticity begins to flow. Decisions become clearer. Relationships grow deeper and more nourishing. Your energy stabilizes, not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you've stopped making it more complicated by trying to please everyone. You discover that the moment you begin to respect yourself, the world around you begins to reorganize itself. What no longer vibrates with your essence naturally drifts away without conflict. What does resonate finds its way to you without resistance. And in that quiet, gentle process, you begin to build a lighter life. The people who remain in your life aren't there for the image you project. They stay because of who you truly are. And that is real freedom. Because in your authenticity, you are no longer forced to hold on to anything that isn't real. Only what is born from the depths of your being is worth sustaining. Even your way of setting boundaries begins to change. You no longer do it from a place of anger or defensiveness, but from a place of clarity. You don't need to argue, to prove, or to explain. You've come to understand that your energy is not available for everything, nor should it be. And every time you choose peace over the desperate need for validation, your soul becomes a little stronger. It's as if an ancient part of you, one that was always trying to adapt, to conform, finally begins to rest, to trust, to remember that you were never meant to be approved by all, but to be true to yourself. And when you rest in that truth, you no longer feel the constant urge to look outside yourself for answers. You begin to trust your own perceptions, your body, your intuition. You realize that what you once called doubt was often your soul speaking to you. Only you kept silencing it out of fear of being rejected, but now you listen. And each time you choose what feels real, even if it's uncomfortable. You reaffirm your path. You reclaim your space. You reclaim your energy. And in that silent coherence, you find liberation. That kind of liberation doesn't need to be shouted. It's felt. It's in the way you walk through life, without apologizing for your existence, without dragging emotional chains behind you, without shrinking yourself to keep others comfortable. And then something truly beautiful happens. Your mere presence begins to become healing, not because of what you do, but because of what you embody. Someone who has stopped living to be liked becomes a light, a beacon for those still lost in the noise. Your authenticity becomes a mirror, a vibration that calls others to remember who they are too. And in that, you inspire, not by force, but by example. Because you are no longer at war with yourself. You are at home within, and that shows in everything. Another deep change that takes place when you stop living to please others is that your creative energy returns to you. For years, that energy had been invested in trying to fit in analyzing how to behave, in guessing what others expected of you. But now, all of that power flows back. And what once felt like anxiety transforms into momentum. Momentum to express, to create, to live without asking for permission. You discover you don't need to be perfect to share what lives inside you. You're no longer paralyzed by the fear of judgment, because what you create now comes from your soul. And when something is born from that sacred space, its value can never be determined by outside approval. Your creativity no longer serves the purpose of pleasing others. It now serves the purpose of expanding you, of building a life that reflects your truth. Even if it looks nothing like anyone else, you begin to experience what it's like to act without fear of making mistakes. You start to make decisions without desperately seeking approval. You speak your mind without dressing up your words for comfort. And all of that doesn't just give you freedom, it brings you back to life. Because trying to please others is exhausting, but being true to yourself is like taking a deep, healing breath every time you choose to create, speak, or move from a place of truth, your truth, instead of from what others expect. You're sending a powerful, clear signal to the universe. I am here, as I am. You no longer live to uphold an image. You begin to live from your essence. That part of you that was buried beneath the masks you've worn for so long. Now, that essence begins to rise to the surface. It finds its way into your voice, your silences, your choices, and even in the quiet energy you carry without saying a single word. And that's when life starts to take on a deeper meaning. There's no need to do more. You simply need to be. And in a world obsessed with appearances and perfection, being raw and unfiltered is a revolutionary act. When your essence blooms without distortion, your mere presence becomes a message in itself. You no longer have to explain why you choose what you choose. You don't owe anyone apologies for the boundaries you've drawn. You no longer dim your light for the comfort of those who aren't ready to see it. Everything in you becomes more real. Your gaze becomes clearer, your words more sincere, your actions more aligned with your values. And that shift sends out a different kind of frequency. People no longer respond to the mask you used to wear. They respond to your truth, to the energy of someone who has come home to themselves. And with that shift, something inevitable begins to happen. Things fall apart. Relationships that only existed because you kept pretending to be someone you weren't begin to fade. Situations that relied on your silence begin to unravel. Dynamics that demanded your constant sacrifice to remain afloat collapse. And even if it hurts, you're grateful because you know deep down that anything that falls when you finally choose to be yourself was never really yours to begin with. And in the rubble of what once was, a new kind of peace begins to rise. Not a peace made of fake smiles and surface-level calm, but a deep, unshakable peace. The kind that comes when your thoughts, feelings, and actions are no longer at war. The kind that comes when every part of you finally exists in the same place, moving in the same direction. Living this way isn't easy, but it is real. And in that reality, there is a sacred weight. It anchors you. It strengthens your steps. It gives you the courage to say, "This is who I am." And if that's not enough for someone, then that's okay. Because for the first time, it's enough for you. Those words don't come from pride. They come from maturity. From the understanding that being loyal to yourself is not something you're willing to compromise anymore. And whatever price you pay for being true to yourself, it's always lighter than the burden of betraying your own soul. In that moment of inner maturity, something profound happens. Your energy stabilizes. Before, your inner state could be thrown off balance by a cold glance, a disapproving tone, or by not receiving the response you were hoping for. Your emotions were constantly at the mercy of others. But not anymore. Because when you stop living to please, your center no longer lives outside of you. It lives within you. You become your own reference point. And that gives you a sense of peace nothing else can replace. You finally understand that you don't need to hold up anything that isn't real. You begin to nurture relationships that don't require you to edit yourself. Bonds where you can breathe fully, where you don't have to hide your shadows or dilute your emotions just to fit in. And from that raw, honest space, you begin to create new ways of existing in the world, softer, quieter, but stronger, more grounded, more true. You start to find yourself in places where before you were just trying to survive. Now, you're breathing deeper, speaking more clearly, walking with the exact weight of who you are. No more, no less. You owe nothing to appearances anymore, because the validation you once thought you needed, you've outgrown it. You now know that the only validation that truly sustains your path is the one that comes from within, the one that arises every time you choose not to abandon yourself. And that loyalty to yourself, it shows up in everything, in the way you say no, in the way you choose yourself, day after day, in the way you stay where your energy feels expansive, and in the way you walk away from any space that no longer fits the fullness of who you are. Even if that means walking alone sometimes, the solitude is no longer a punishment. It becomes a sacred space, a temple, a place where your soul is finally heard, where your truth is no longer up for negotiation. Thank you for staying until the end. If you felt that this message echoed within you, deep in the places where your soul lives, that's not a coincidence. You're standing at a pivotal point on your journey, one where pretending is no longer sustainable, one where your spirit is demanding space to exist without masks, without needing permission, without trying to please. Carl Jung once said that the most terrifying thing for a human being is to fully accept themselves, but it's also the most liberating. And if you've already begun to walk that path, even with trembling steps, you're closer to yourself than you've ever been. Remember this. You didn't come into this world to maintain an image others wanted to see. You came here to embody your truth with courage, and every single time you choose not to betray yourself, you're healing, you're waking up. If this message accompanied you, if it reminded you of who you are when no one else is watching, I invite you to keep walking this path with us. Subscribe to the channel. Every word shared here is meant to nourish your growth, expand your awareness, and remind you you're not alone. We'll meet again in the next one, learning to let go of what no longer serves us. Think about how often you find yourself trapped in repetitive thoughts about a person, a situation, or a painful memory. These experiences can drain your energy, fill you with anxiety, and make you feel stuck. Maybe it's a relationship that brings you more pain than joy, yet you struggle to walk away. Or perhaps it's a past event that lingers in your mind, making you feel like you can never fully move on. Jung suggested that these patterns are not random. They are messages from your unconscious mind urging you to pay attention. Unlike logical reasoning, the unconscious does not communicate through words, but rather through emotions, symbols, and behavioral patterns. It continuously sends us signals, yet most of the time we ignore them. This is why we often find ourselves repeating the same mistakes, facing similar conflicts, or attracting the same kind of relationships. According to Jung, this happens because we have not yet learned the lessons these experiences are meant to teach us. Life, he believed, is an ongoing dialogue between the conscious and the unconscious. Until we acknowledge this internal conversation, we remain caught in a cycle of frustration and pain. True emotional detachment is not about forcing yourself to forget or pretending something doesn't affect you. It's about recognizing the emotional weight you've been carrying, processing it, and consciously deciding to release it. Letting go is not a form of escape. It is an act of courage. It requires us to face our deepest fears, acknowledge our wounds, and make peace with them. When we continue to hold on to people, situations, or memories that no longer align with who we are, we sacrifice our own well-being. We may lose our peace of mind, our energy, or even our sense of purpose. Jung taught that real transformation happens when we dare to confront our inner world. By embracing our shadows instead of running from them, we open the door to self-discovery, growth, and a deeper connection with ourselves. The question is, are you willing to release what is holding you back in order to step into the life you truly deserve? Imagine standing at a crossroads. One path feels familiar, predictable, and safe. Yet deep inside, you know it leaves you unfulfilled. The other is uncertain, filled with the unknown, but it holds the possibility of something greater. Most people choose the familiar road, even if it causes them pain, because the fear of uncertainty outweighs their desire for change. But Jung challenges us to rethink that fear, not as an obstacle, but as an invitation to grow. When you start releasing what no longer serves you, something remarkable happens. Your energy shifts, your mind clears, and suddenly, life begins to align. The right people enter your life. New opportunities emerge. And most importantly, you rediscover a sense of peace you may have forgotten was possible. But this process demands courage. Letting go is rarely easy, especially when we've grown attached to what is familiar, even if it harms us. The key lies in trusting yourself, in that quiet, inner voice that always knows what is best, even when you ignore it. Jung believed that within each of us exists an internal compass, a silent guide pointing us toward our truth. This compass is our intuition, our deep connection to the unconscious. And when we learn to follow it, life becomes simpler, more authentic, and profoundly fulfilling. Now, take a moment to reflect. What is truly holding you back? What emotional weight are you still carrying that no longer serves you? And how would your life change if you allowed yourself to release it? It's not an easy decision, but it's one of the most powerful choices you can make. Because in the end, Emotional detachment is not about loss. It's about liberation. It's about creating space for new beginnings, for what truly matters, for what aligns with your soul. And when you take that step, everything transforms. Your energy, your relationships, and most importantly, your inner peace. As you embark on this journey of emotional detachment, remember, you are not losing, you are gaining. You might find yourself letting go of people, situations, or even long-held beliefs. But in doing so, you are reclaiming something far more valuable: your emotional freedom and your true self. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as a journey of self-discovery, a path to uncover who you truly are beyond the roles and masks you have worn to fit into the world. Individuation, according to Jung, is the key to a fulfilling life. It is a process of integration, embracing both your light and your shadows, and allowing yourself to be whole. But you cannot be whole if you are still clinging to toxic relationships, limiting beliefs, or unresolved emotions. Letting go is an essential part of this journey. Only when you release what is not truly yours can you open yourself to what is meant for you. Have you ever felt like you were living a life that wasn't really your own, as if you were merely following a script someone else wrote for you? Now is the time to take control of your story. Jung would argue that this happens because we have allowed external expectations to dictate our identity. Society, family, friends, and even our own insecurities shape a mold we struggle to fit into, even at the cost of betraying our true selves. But there comes a point when that mask becomes unbearable, when the weight of pretending is too heavy to carry. That moment when your authentic self begins to push against the surface can be unsettling, even painful. Yet, it is also a powerful turning point, a chance to break free. Because the moment you start questioning the illusions you've been living under, when you dare to confront what you truly feel and think, you take the first real step toward liberation. Jung encourages us to see this not as a crisis, but as a transformation, an opportunity to shed what no longer defines us and embrace what genuinely does. You may be wondering, how do I begin? How do I let go? The answer lies in self-reflection. Set aside a quiet moment with yourself and ask, what emotions have I been suppressing? What situations or relationships are draining me? And most importantly, what do I truly want for my life? These questions may seem simple, but they hold immense power. Answering them with honesty sparks a conversation with your unconscious, and that dialogue is the first step toward healing. Jung believed that the unconscious is like a vast ocean, full of hidden treasures, but also lurking shadows. These shadows are the parts of ourselves we have denied, buried, or rejected because they felt unacceptable. But ignoring them does not erase them. In fact, it strengthens their hold over us. Only when we find the courage to confront them can we begin to integrate and release their influence. Imagine your mind as a garden. If you neglect the weeds, they will not disappear, they will grow, choking the flowers, draining the soil of nutrients. But if you take the time to clear them, to tend to the space, you can plant something new, something vibrant. The same applies to your emotions and relationships. If you do not examine and nurture them, they will end up controlling you. However, the moment you decide to face them, you create the space for something better. This process may lead you to realize that certain people in your life no longer align with who you are becoming. Some relationships, instead of uplifting you, keep you trapped in cycles of negativity. Letting go of them is not an act of selfishness, but one of self-respect. Jung would remind us that self-love is not a luxury. It is a necessity. Because only when you truly value yourself can you extend authentic love to others. You may also uncover limiting beliefs that have been holding you back for years. Thoughts like, I am not enough. I need this person to be happy. Or if I let go, I will never find something better. Your beliefs are not absolute truths. They are stories you have constructed over time, often shaped by the expectations of others. But what if I told you that you have the power to rewrite those stories? You are not doomed to live under the same limiting narratives. You can choose a perspective that empowers you instead of one that keeps you trapped in the past. When you start making these changes, something remarkable happens. Not only does your mind feel lighter, but your energy shifts as well. The emotional burdens that once kept you stuck begin to dissolve, transforming into a force that drives your personal growth. Confusion fades into clarity, apathy turns into motivation, and you experience a deep sense of peace you may not have felt in a long time. This is because letting go is not about losing. It is about returning to yourself, to your balance, to your true essence. Emotional detachment is not an act of coldness or indifference. It is, in reality, a sign of emotional and spiritual maturity. Jung spoke of the importance of integrating the parts of ourselves that we have chosen to ignore or suppress. Embracing our shadow does not just heal us internally. It transforms our relationships, allowing us to break free from toxic cycles and repetitive patterns. Every time you choose to release something that no longer aligns with you, you are making a courageous decision. You are sending a clear message to your unconscious mind. You deserve more. You are ready to evolve, and you are willing to create space for what truly elevates you. But this process is not easy. Letting go means confronting some of your deepest fears. The fear of being alone, the fear of change, the fear of the unknown. Yet, as Jung taught, true power lies in facing these fears head-on. Resistance to change is natural. Your mind will try to cling to what is familiar, even if that familiarity brings suffering. But here's the real question. What are you sacrificing by staying where you no longer belong? Are you giving up your mental peace, your happiness, your dreams? Choosing to let go is not a loss. It is an opening. You are not losing anything that truly belongs to you. You are making room for something greater, something more authentic, something aligned with who you are becoming. Imagine how your life would change if you stopped carrying the weight of what no longer serves you. Think about the relief, the regained energy, the deep sense of calm you could experience. That kind of freedom is not a distant fantasy. It is within your reach. All it takes is one decision, recognizing what is holding you back, and choosing to release it. Jung taught that our unconscious mind constantly communicates with us, but it does so through symbols, emotions, and recurring patterns in our lives. If you find yourself stuck in relationships that drain you or situations that bring you continuous discomfort, it is not a coincidence. It is your unconscious sending you a message, showing you a lesson that you have yet to learn. However, we often ignore these signs, hoping things will change on their own or believing we have no control over our reality. But the truth is, change is always within your grasp. It is not about waiting for the perfect moment or relying on luck. It is about taking action, listening to what your soul truly needs, and having the courage to write a new story for yourself. Let me tell you something. You have the power. You have the ability to reshape your life, redirect your energy, and create an environment that truly reflects your values and authenticity. But to do that, you must be willing to release what no longer serves you. And this act of letting go isn't just a gift to yourself. It's a ripple effect that touches everyone around you. When you free yourself from toxic relationships and limiting patterns, you unconsciously inspire others to do the same. Emotional detachment isn't about abandoning everything without thought. It's about taking a deep, honest look at your life, recognizing what aligns with you and what doesn't, then making choices that reflect that awareness. This process takes courage, but it also demands patience and self-compassion. Transformation doesn't happen overnight, but every small step you take moves you closer to the inner peace you crave. And here's the remarkable thing. As you begin to release, you'll notice that life starts to shift in unexpected ways. The right people come into your life, New opportunities arise, and decisions that once felt overwhelming suddenly become clear and effortless. It's as if the universe responds to your decision to live in alignment with your truth. Jung spoke of synchronicity, a profound concept that perfectly illustrates this. When you are in tune with yourself, the external world begins to mirror that harmony. This isn't magic. It's the manifestation of your internal energy. And that energy, when it's focused and unburdened by unnecessary attachments, has the power to transform not only your life, but also the lives of those around you. Of course, this journey won't be without challenges. There will be moments when the pull of the familiar tempts you to return to old habits, even when you know they no longer bring you happiness. But every time you choose peace over chaos, authenticity over fear, you're building a life of meaning, one that no one can take from you. As you navigate the path of emotional detachment, remember, you are not alone. Even though it may feel like you're venturing into the unknown, countless others have walked this road before you. Jung referred to this as a journey of the inner hero, a process where each step toward confronting your fears and shedding emotional burdens brings you closer to your truest self. Think of it this way. Every time you choose to let go, you are breaking invisible chains that have held you captive. Chains woven from expectations, guilt, and the fear of rejection. But by breaking them, you're opening the door to a kind of freedom that many will never experience because they remain trapped in the comfort of the familiar. Walking this path does not mean you will be free from pain or discomfort. On the contrary, there will be moments when you feel fragile, confused, or even lost. Yet, it is precisely in those moments of uncertainty that the most profound transformation takes place. Jung believed that consciousness cannot awaken without suffering. It is through these struggles that you uncover your true strength, your resilience, and most importantly, your authenticity. Releasing what no longer serves you allows you to reconnect with something that has always been within you. Your intuition, that inner voice that knows what is right for you. Even when you choose to ignore it, but when you finally start listening, something extraordinary happens. The decisions that once felt impossible suddenly become clear. The relationships that once drained you start to fade, making room for the ones that uplift you. This is not random. Jung believed in the power of synchronicity, the mysterious way in which events align as if the universe is responding to your inner transformation. These experiences are not mere coincidences. They are proof that aligning your life with your truth has a real impact on the world around you. However, reaching this level requires deep self-exploration. You must be willing to face your shadows, the hidden aspects of yourself that you have suppressed because they feel uncomfortable or even frightening. Jung famously said that enlightenment is not achieved by imagining figures of light, but by bringing darkness into consciousness. This is the most profound and transformative inner work you can do. When you face your shadows, you are not just wounds. You are reclaiming lost parts of yourself. Perhaps you will rediscover forgotten talents, abandoned dreams, or an inner strength you never knew you had. This process is far from easy, but the result is a life that feels genuine, purposeful, and, above all, peaceful. Imagine waking up each morning feeling light, knowing that every decision you make is aligned with who you truly are. This does not mean that life will be perfect or that you will never encounter obstacles, but it does mean that you will have the clarity and strength to face them with balance and confidence. Part of this journey involves learning to set boundaries. Jung believed that our energy is sacred and must be protected from anything that drains it. This is not always easy, especially when it involves people close to us. But setting boundaries is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of self-respect. When you take care of your energy, you are not only benefiting yourself, but also those who truly matter, because you are showing up as your best self. Think about how different your life would be if you could say no without guilt. If you could prioritize your needs without feeling selfish. If you could surround yourself with people who uplift you instead of exhausting you. This is not some unattainable dream. It is something you can achieve when you choose to detach emotionally from what no longer resonates with you. Letting go does not mean failure or giving up. It means choosing something better for yourself. Choosing yourself means prioritizing your peace, happiness, and authenticity. Every time you make decisions that support your well-being, you are actively shaping a life that truly reflects who you are. When you begin to live in alignment with your inner truth, something incredible happens. You naturally attract everything that resonates with your essence. The right people, the right opportunities, and the deep sense of peace you have been searching for all start to flow effortlessly into your life. But this is not a coincidence. It is the direct result of having the courage to release what no longer serves you and embrace the person you were always meant to be. This journey is not about reaching a final destination. It is a continuous evolution. There will be days when fear or doubt try to creep back in. But now you have something invaluable, the awareness that you have a choice. You get to decide which thoughts to nurture, which relationships to keep, and which path to follow. That is your greatest power. The beauty of emotional detachment, as Jung taught, is that it not only transforms your inner world, but also creates a ripple effect in the world around you. When you break free from the chains of the past, you inspire the others to do the same. When you choose to live from a place of authenticity, you set off a chain reaction that touches everyone in your life. Your transformation becomes a source of light, a silent yet powerful influence that encourages others to embrace their own truth. So now, I invite you to reflect deeply. What are you ready to release today? What beliefs, relationships, or emotions have been holding you back from moving forward? The answers to these questions could be the key to stepping into the life you were always meant to live. The decision to let go is not a sign of weakness. It is an act of courage. It means you are ready to step into the life you truly deserve, free from the weight of the past and open to the infinite possibilities that await you. Growth is not about avoiding pain, but about transforming it into wisdom. It is about using every challenge, every setback, and every difficult moment as fuel to propel you forward. Imagine for a moment how your life would change if you no longer carried the burdens that have been weighing you down. Imagine waking up every day with a heart full of peace, knowing that you are in alignment with your truth, no longer seeking validation from others, no longer trapped by past regrets, but instead walking with confidence toward the life you are meant to live. This is not a dream. It is a choice. A choice to reclaim your power, to break free from limiting beliefs, and to embrace the limitless potential that exists within you. The journey will not always be easy, and there will be moments of doubt, but every step you take toward your true self will be worth it. You are capable of incredible transformation, and the moment you decide to release what no longer serves you, you will realize that the only thing standing between you and your best life has always been the fear of letting go. So I ask you once more, what are you ready to release today? What part of your past, what fear, what toxic attachment are you willing to leave behind so that you can finally embrace the future that is waiting for you? The time to action is now. Your new life begins the moment you choose it. And remember, this is just the beginning. If you found this message valuable, make sure to subscribe and stay with us for more content that will guide you on your journey of transformation. See you in the next video. A vague suspicion, a tightness in your chest, a quiet whisper in the background of your thoughts telling you something isn't right. You're standing there trying to hold on, while the person who once looked at you like you were everything now seems distant, unreachable, emotionally absent. They used to smile when they saw you. They used to seek you out, to need you, or at least it felt that way. But now, without any clear explanation, they've started to fade away. They no longer text you the same way. They no longer listen with real attention. Their eyes no longer hold the same warmth when they look at you. But you You refuse to accept it. You create stories to justify their behavior. You invent reasons, excuses, imaginary circumstances. You lie to yourself, because to face the truth would mean demolishing the emotional castle you've built, brick by brick, out of pure illusion. And somewhere deep inside you, inside all of us, there's a part that clings to the sweet lie rather than face the violent truth. You're not here by accident. There's something in you that already knows. It senses it. It's tired of pretending not to notice. Yes, maybe you're surrounded by people. But how many of them are really with you? How many stay when you're no longer useful? When you're no longer fixing their problems? When you're not feeding their ego or filling their emptiness? There are people who don't love you, not the way you think, not the way you need. They tolerate you. They use you. They manipulate you with carefully rehearsed smiles. They keep you close, but always one step behind, because they're not interested in your essence. What they want is your energy, your attention, your emotional availability. And the worst part? They know exactly what they're doing. They know what buttons to press to keep you hooked. They know how to sound broken, just enough for you to feel like you have to fix them. And you, with that limitless heart, you do it at the expense of your peace, your identity, your emotional well-being. Have you ever asked yourself why some people disappear just when you need them the most? Why they only show up when they're hurting, but vanish when it's your soul that's breaking? Have you stopped to reflect on how often you give and how little you receive in return? That emotional scale is always out of balance, but you keep trying to steady it, even if it means sacrificing yourself completely. Why? What are you really looking for? Love, acceptance, some long-lost validation you never received in childhood. Maybe a subconscious promise that if you just give enough, someone will finally choose to stay. Carl Jung said it clearly. People do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And that's exactly what we're going to do now. We're going to descend, without fear, into the basement of your consciousness, into that dark corner where you've been storing all the "it's fine" and maybe they're just busy excuses. We're going to turn the light on in that uncomfortable space where a painful truth has been waiting to be acknowledged. That person you care so deeply about doesn't feel the same way. They never did. What they wanted wasn't you. It was the way you made them feel. The reflection of themselves they saw in your eyes. What they loved was what they could take from you. And the most painful part, you knew it. From the very beginning, you sensed it, but you looked away. Because the human mind is a master illusionist. It hides red flags behind hope. It turns warning signs into background noise. Accepting that someone has been using you is not only humiliating, it's emotionally shattering. It forces you to confront your vulnerability, your deep need for love, your emotional dependence. And that's where the real battle begins. Between what you want to believe and what's actually happening. Between the fantasy you've been feeding and the reality that's been draining you. This isn't going to be a comfortable video. You're not here to have your ego stroked. You're here because part of you is exhausted. Part of you needs answers. You want to understand why you let them treat you this way. You want to learn how to finally recognize those people who don't value you, who don't love you, who only use you. Not by mistake, but by design. As a psychological pattern. As a way of being. This isn't just one sad story. It's a mirror. And what you're going to see might not be pleasant, but it will be necessary. So, get ready. We're going to explore the fractures in the human soul. We're going to analyze the behaviors of people who pretend to care, who use words as bait, who know exactly when to show up and when to disappear, just to keep you emotionally dependent. And we're going to do it through the lens of deep psychology, through the darkness that Jung understood so well. Because if you don't confront your shadow, you'll spend your life trapped in it. This is not just another video. This is a confrontation with them. Yes, but above all, with yourself. Let's continue exactly where we left off. We're going to go even deeper. No circles, no repetition, no soft edges. Let's talk about something silent, yet deeply powerful. Something very few dare to name. Emotional debt. Yes, emotional debt. Because when someone uses you and you don't see it, or worse, you see it and allow it, you fall into a toxic dynamic that rarely speaks its name, but always leaves a permanent scar. You begin to feel like you owe them something, a debt you never signed for, never agreed to, and yet you carry it every day. Why? Because they made you believe you had to. That walking away meant you were selfish. That setting boundaries made you a bad person. That if you didn't save them, you were heartless. They conditioned you. Slowly, skillfully, with guilty silences, with gentle manipulation disguised as love, with words like, "You're all I have," or "I'd be nothing without you." They turned you into their safety net, their unofficial therapist, their emotional partner without commitment, their crutch. But they never gave you the same in return. They never matched your effort. They never sat down to truly ask, "And how are you, really?" Because it was never about you. It never was. And here's where one of the most sinister parts of this dynamic shows up. False gratitude. That empty kind of thankfulness used to keep you close. They say, "Thank you for always being there." But they do nothing to protect your well-being. They say, "I don't know what I'd do without you," but never make sure you have a space to lean on too. Gratitude becomes emotional blackmail. And you, with your heart full of pure intentions, fall into the trap again and again, because a part of you needs that role of savior, even if you're bleeding inside. Carl Jung once spoke of the archetype of the wounded healer, a figure who dedicates themselves to healing others, all while neglecting their own wounds. And maybe, without even realizing it, that's exactly where you find yourself right now, fixing, supporting, holding others together, even as the cracks inside you continue to widen, because the more you give, the further they drift away, the more you surrender, the more they demand, the harder you try to be seen as valuable, the more invisible and replaceable you feel. And here comes one of life's cruelest paradoxes, the fear of losing someone who never truly loved you. How can that be? How can you cry over someone who has given you nothing tangible, nothing real, beyond the illusion that maybe someday they might? It's because you're not really mourning them. You're grieving the version of them that existed only in your mind. You're mourning the promises that were never fulfilled. All the scenarios you built up in your imagination. All the hopes, the what-ifs, the dreams that never came to be and never will. So how do you begin to free yourself? The key lies in recognizing the difference between presence and connection. Because someone can physically be next to you every day and still not be truly with you in any meaningful sense. And the opposite is also true. Someone can leave your life and still treat you with more respect than the one who shares your bed each night. Some people don't stay because of love. They stay because it's convenient, because you're useful, because you've unknowingly become their free therapist, their emotional outlet, their personal audience, their dumping ground for unresolved frustrations. And if you don't put a stop to it, this turns into a pattern, an emotional addiction cleverly disguised as loyalty. You start justifying the unjustifiable. You begin to normalize pain, to romanticize waiting, to convince yourself that true love must mean sacrifice. But let me be very clear. What you're experiencing is not love. It's a one-sided dependency. A parasitic relationship where you keep giving and they just keep taking. And if you're still holding on to hope, If you're still telling yourself that one day they'll wake up, see your worth, and finally say, "I appreciate you," then please stop. That day will not come, because someone who feeds off you, who drains your energy for their own survival, will never be the one to teach you how to walk away. They won't let you go. Not because they love you, but because losing you would mean confronting the emptiness they carry inside. And they're not ready to face that. They'd rather have you continue to carry their darkness while they pretend to be your light. Now we enter deeper waters. The idea of idealization as a form of emotional escapism. You don't idealize someone who uses you because they're truly exceptional. You do it because you need something to hold on to. You turn them into your compass, your anchor, your reason to keep going. Because if you let go, you're forced to confront the gaping void of your own loneliness. And that hurts more than any breakup ever could. But you can't keep running from yourself. You can't keep holding up someone who would never stop to catch you if you were the one falling. You can't keep calling it fate when it's clearly a toxic loop. Want to know if someone really loves you or just needs you? Watch how they react when you stop giving them what they want, when you say no, when you set a boundary. That's when the truth comes out. Because real love isn't tested when everything's easy. It's revealed when you're no longer useful to them. That's when the mask falls. That's when you see whether there was genuine affection or just convenience. And now, the hardest part to admit. Maybe that person you're so deeply tied to isn't even fully aware of the damage they're causing. Because there's something more dangerous than conscious manipulation. Emotional unconsciousness. People who've never done the inner work, who carry unresolved trauma, who act out old patterns on autopilot. And you become the collateral damage of their inner war. But that still doesn't excuse it. Understanding isn't the same as excusing. You can have compassion for someone's pain and still walk away because your peace matters more than any shared history. You weren't born to be someone's unfinished project. You weren't born to be a backup plan. You weren't born to be an emotional sponge for someone else's chaos. And if you've made it this far, if you're still here, still listening, it's because something inside you is already awakening. That part of you that no longer wants to be useful, but wants to be loved, truly loved, without conditions, without manipulation, without emotional debt. So now, the question becomes painfully simple. How many more chances will you give someone who doesn't love you? How many more times will you allow someone who doesn't value you to take up space in your life? How much longer will you postpone the bravest act of all? Walking away when you know you're not being appreciated. You don't need to scream. You don't need revenge. You just need to do the one thing they fear the most. Disappear. Because when you're gone, they can no longer use you. When you walk away, they lose their hold on you. And when you finally close that door, even if it breaks your heart, you begin to take your power back. And that's where we leave it for now. But what happens next? That's entirely up to you. Because if you've stayed until the end, if you haven't clicked away, if you didn't tune out with a, "Yeah, I already knew this excuse," then let me tell you something that no one else will. You are no longer the same person you were just minutes ago. Because now, you have something you didn't have before. Awareness. Awareness of the hidden game. The silent power plays. The emotional language that speaks louder than any empty promise. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. That strange feeling you've carried with you. The sense that something was always off. It wasn't your imagination. That discomfort, that unease that would sneak up on you in their presence. The weight in your chest, the tension in your body. It was all real. It wasn't anxiety. It wasn't paranoia. It was your intuition. It was your soul, desperately trying to speak, to warn you, to shake you awake. But you silenced it. You forced it into the shadows because you didn't want to upset someone who deep down never truly cared for you. You tolerated the discomfort because you convinced yourself that it was normal, that love was supposed to feel like that. Confusing, painful, heavy. But now, you're not asleep anymore. The fog is lifting. The illusion is crumbling. You start to see the cracks, the imbalance, the silent manipulation, the dependency disguised as love. You start to see that it was never love. It was need, a need to be needed, a desire to be chosen, a hunger for attention that was never fully satisfied. And now, finally, you understand. You weren't free. You were convenient. You weren't cherished. You were used. You were a placeholder. A temporary comfort, a distraction, and the most powerful realization, you know that you can leave, that you deserve to leave. Because real self-love isn't a motivational quote taped to your mirror. It's not a bubble bath or soft music playing in the background. Real self-love is hard. It's painful. It's making the decision to walk away from someone who never truly saw you, who only came around when they were lonely and vanished the moment you needed them. And right here, right now, is where everything begins to change. Because when you find the courage to disappear from the life of someone who only saw you as useful, you don't become the villain. You become someone who finally realized that their worth isn't measured by how much they are needed, but by how much they choose not to give away to people who never earned it. You're not running away. You're being reborn. You're shedding the version of yourself that settled for less, that accepted crumbs and mistook them for care, the version of you that thought closeness meant love, that being around was enough, even if your soul was starving. And yes, it hurts. It burns. You can feel it in your chest. Your throat tightens, just thinking about the goodbye. The thought of walking away feels like losing a part of yourself. But listen, that is your sign. That pain. It's the signal. Because no one should hurt you that deeply. No one should have that much control over your peace, especially from a distance. No one should be allowed to disturb your mind, your heart, your stability, the way they do. There are people who don't wish you harm, but still bring harm to your life. And that's enough. That's more than enough. Enough to close the door. Enough to disappear. Enough to finally, truly choose yourself. Yes, it might be difficult at first. Yes, the guilt may whisper. Yes, the urge to explain yourself might feel overwhelming. But hear me clearly. Do not explain your peace. Do not justify your boundaries. Do not apologize for saving yourself. The person who failed to appreciate you when you were present doesn't deserve even a single word when you walk away. So if any part of this message has stirred something in you, if it has hit a nerve, cracked something open, brought something to the surface that you've been trying to bury, I want you to do just one thing, a simple act of declaration, a silent revolution. Leave this phrase in the comments. I am not your shelter if you are my storm. Nothing more. Just that. Anyone who reads it will understand. They'll know you've awakened too. And if this video spoke to you in a way no one else ever has, if you felt that finally someone found the words for what you've been carrying silently inside, then subscribe. But not out of obligation. Subscribe because here, in this chaotic corner of emotional turmoil, we're not done. Not even close. We're going to keep digging. We're going to keep pulling uncomfortable truths out from under the rug where they've been buried for too long. We're going to keep tearing off the masks, one by one, until what's left is nothing but the raw, unfiltered reality. And we're going to keep choosing something that very few have the courage to face. The truth, even when it hurts. Share this. Share it with the one who needs it most, with the person who's been stuck for years in a one-sided relationship, convincing themselves that crumbs are enough, with the one still waiting for a call that's never going to come, with the soul who wakes up every morning hoping that this will be the day they're finally seen, finally chosen. Be the spark. Be the switch that turns on the light in the darkest corner of someone else's shadow. And now, I'm leaving, but not like everyone else. Not with a lukewarm goodbye. Not with a cookie-cutter phrase that sounds nice but means nothing. I'm leaving with silence. The kind of silence that only arrives after everything's been said. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort but confronts. The silence that forces you to think, to feel, to remember. I'm leaving with that echo that won't shut off. That voice in your head that keeps playing even after you've closed this video. Because once you know your worth, you simply can't stay where you're not valued. So close your eyes, breathe, and disappear until the next truth finds you.